The significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. That's Albert Einstein.
Powerful words.
Really powerful, aren't they? And they feel particularly relevant for what we're diving into today. Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive.
Your shortcut to getting truly well-informed.
Exactly. We plunge into the crucial info, pull out those essential insights you need. And today, we are navigating some, well, tricky waters. International climate diplomacy. Specifically, the recent UNFCCC June climate meetings over in Bonn. That's the 62nd meeting of the subsidiary bodies, SB62 for short.
Right.
Now, this wasn't just ticking boxes. From day one, it was really clear that some pretty fundamental disagreements were jamming the works.
Yeah.
To the point where they almost couldn't even get the conference agenda adopted, a real standoff right from the start.
And that opening standoff, that's precisely why this deep dive is so important for you, our listener.
Right.
Because whether you're, say, a UPSC aspirant needing to get your head around global environmental governance, international relations, maybe prepping for your daily mains current affairs.
Crucial topics.
Absolutely. Or maybe you're just someone keen to understand the real details of global climate action. Understanding Bonn is key.
So what's our mission today?
Well, our mission is to critically discuss these vital current affairs, drawing from sources like Down to Earth, and really pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge. We want to help you grasp these critical issues, climate finance, these trade disputes that just keep shaping the global climate agenda.
And we'll stick to the sources, give you that impartial, in-depth view.
Exactly. No spin, just the substance.
Okay, so a standoff from day one. That sounds, incredibly disruptive for a meeting trying to tackle urgent global problems. What actually happened on June 16th, 2025, that opening day? Our sources say the agenda wasn't even gavelled open.
Yeah, that's right. It couldn't be formally adopted. Discussions just couldn't start. And look, this wasn't some minor procedural hiccup, not at all.
So what was it then?
The deadlock, it stemmed from pretty wide resistance, mainly from developed countries, to two specific agenda items. Items proposed by developing nations.
Oh.
And this resistance, it was solid enough, unified enough across certain blocs, that it just paralyzed the negotiations. For almost 2 whole days.
2 days.
Think about it. An international climate conference, huge task, and they couldn't even agree on what they were supposed to be discussing. It really, it laid bare some deep existing fractures.
And how long did that paralysis actually last? Because nearly 2 days sounds like forever in that context.
It certainly felt like it on the ground, I'm sure. The agenda was finally adopted around 6 p.m. on the second day.
Wow.
So for nearly 48 hours, every single negotiation item, all the work that needed doing, it was just stuck in limbo.
That must have set quite a tone.
Oh, definitely. A very tense, very frustrated tone for the rest of the meeting. It sort of foreshadowed the difficulties ahead.
Okay, so the conference is frozen. What were these 2 items, the ones causing such a massive holdup? And who put them forward?
Right. These were put forward by the like-minded developing countries, bloc the LMDC. That's a really significant group. And importantly for our listeners, it includes India.
Okay, the LMDCs.
Yeah, they formally submitted these 2 new items for the Bonn agenda back in early June. So they were sort of laying the groundwork for this confrontation.
Right. Let's zoom in on the first one then. Climate finance, specifically Article 9.1 of the Paris Agreement. What were the LMDCs asking for here? Why was it such a, a flashpoint?
Okay, so the LMDC submission, it called for a dedicated agenda track just to discuss climate finance. But crucially, they wanted to discuss, and I'm quoting loosely here, the ways to implement Article 9.1 in a very specific manner.
How so?
In a way that provides additionality, predictability, concessionality, and transparency from developed countries for developing countries.
Okay, those words sound technical but important. Predictability, concessionality.
Hugely important. This isn't just bureaucratic jargon. It cuts right to the heart of how money is supposed to flow from richer nations to developing ones for climate action, and crucially, the terms on which that money is provided.
Give us some context here. What about the big finance goal agreed recently?
Good point. You probably remember COP29 in Baku. A big outcome there was the agreement on this new collective quantified goal, the NCQG.
Right, the NCQG.
Yeah, targeting $300 billion per year for developing countries. Part of a bigger picture, maybe $1.3 trillion by 2035 from all sorts of sources, private sector included. And developed countries were tasked with leading the mobilization effort.
Okay.
Now, here's the absolutely critical distinction. The inside developing countries were hammering home in Bonn. COP29 Baku, it largely focused on mobilization of finance,
Mobilization, meaning?
meaning it aligns more with Article 9.3 of Paris,
Mm.
using public money to kind of kickstart or crowd in private finance or other non-public sources.
Which sounds okay on the surface. More
Yeah.
money, right?
You'd think so. But developing countries see this as fundamentally less predictable and, crucially, less accountable.
Ah, okay.
Their argument is that Article 9.1, which is about the direct provision of public funds from developed countries that got sidelined in Baku.
So 9.1 is direct government-to-government money, essentially.
Exactly.
Huh.
And for developing countries, that direct public funding offers much more predictability, better terms, concessionality, and clearer accountability. These are vital for long-term climate planning, for building trust.
I see.
Think about it practically. Private finance often wants higher returns, it's less flexible, maybe not suitable for, say, crucial adaptation projects that don't generate revenue.
Like building seawalls or drought-resistant crops.
Precisely. So for developing nations, this isn't just show me the money. It's about getting reliable, predictable public money. They see it as a matter of historical responsibility, of climate equity.
Okay, that clarifies the finance fight. It sounds like a real clash of philosophies there. So what was the other major sticking point? The one that helped grind things to a halt?
Indeed. The second really contentious item was all about unilateral trade measures.
Unilateral trade measures, like carbon tariffs.
Exactly like that. We're talking about specific tools causing a lot of friction. The EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, is the big example.
Right, CBAM.
But also similar things coming from the UK, from Canada. These basically put a levy, a tariff, on goods coming in from countries that the implementing nation thinks have weaker carbon pricing or climate rules.
Oh, okay. And what did the LMDCs propose on this?
Their proposed agenda item was, let's say, very pointed. They asked parties, and again quoting the essence, to reiterate opposition to the politicization of climate change issues and all forms of unilateralism and protectionism.
Strong words.
Very. And they went on to say these measures, especially those with negative cross-border impacts, actually violate the objectives and principles of the UNFCCC and its Paris Agreement.
Wow. So they're saying these tools undermine the whole climate framework.
That's their argument. And look, this isn't some brand new concern that just materialized. Our sources, observer reports from the ground, they point out this is very similar to an item, the basic group of the group. Brazil, South Africa, India, China tried to get on the agenda at COP29 and got blocked, primarily by the EU.
So this has history.
Definitely. For developing economies, this isn't just a trade issue. It hits their sovereignty, their economic development path. They worry these mechanisms are just protectionism in disguise.
Making it harder for them to industrialize, to export fairly.
Exactly. Especially while they're also trying to meet their climate targets. It ties back into those long-running debates on equity, fairness, who caused the problem historically.
Right. So you have this dynamic. The entire G77 and China bloc, that's over 130 developing countries, lining up behind the LMDC's demands on both finance and trade. But developed countries, especially the EU and its allies, just refusing to include them on the formal agenda, which led to nearly 48 hours of these intense closed-door talks. Did the developed countries, did the EU offer anything during that time? Any sort of bridging proposal to break the logjam?
Well, according to the reports that came out of Bonn, the answer seems to be no.
No proposals at all.
Apparently not. No bridging proposals offered by the EU or its allies during those, nearly 2 days of frantic backroom talks. It was just a complete standoff. Each side dug in.
Which must have just ramped up the frustration levels.
Hugely. This lack of proactive compromise from the developed countryside definitely deepened this sense of frustration among developing nations.
So, given that absolute deadlock, what was the final compromise? The thing announced on the evening of June 17th. Because it sounds, frankly, less like a compromise and more like someone blinked.
That's a pretty sharp assessment. Yeah, it certainly didn't feel like a win for the developing countries. Let's break it down. On Article 9.1, the climate finance item, it was withdrawn as a standalone agenda item.
So they lost that direct discussion.
For now, yes. But there was an understanding reached. It would be discussed through substantive consultations right there at SB 62.
What does that mean, substantive consultations?
Less formal than an agenda item, but more than just chats in the corridor. The SB chairs promised to report the outcomes of these talks at the next meeting, SB 63, which is alongside COP30 in Belém, Brazil, in November.
And
then parties could consider how to move forward, including potentially a standalone agenda item on this matter in the future. So Basically, kicked down the road.
But maybe not buried forever.
A slim possibility remains, yes. They kept the door slightly ajar for a future dedicated discussion.
Okay. And what about the unilateral trade measures item?
That was also withdrawn from the formal agenda. The understanding there was that, quote, related issues will be discussed in relevant agenda items, including the Just Transition Work Program.
So folded into other talks?
Sort of. And to make it official, they're actually adding a footnote to the Just Transition Work Program agenda. It'll state something like, related issues will be among the issues to be discussed, including the Just Transition Work Program.
A footnote compromise?
Pretty much. Again, no direct, dedicated discussion on those specific unilateral measures that the LMDCs wanted to challenge head-on, but an acknowledgement that these sensitive issues are relevant in broader discussions like just transition.
So the practical effect is delay.
Delay and dilution, arguably. Developing nations didn't get the high-level, focused debate they wanted on these absolutely crucial issues. Their concerns remain, but perhaps on a slower burn, potentially.
And the reaction from developing countries, it must have been pretty raw after all that.
Oh, absolutely. Sources really highlighted the deep disappointment, the frustration. Bolivia spoke very powerfully for the LMDC bloc. India also expressed profound dissatisfaction with this reluctance, this refusal by developed countries to even properly discuss what they see as fundamental obligations on finance.
Did they say they'd drop it?
No way. They explicitly vowed to bring Article 9.1 back forcefully at COP30 in Belém.
Okay.
And there was this really striking statement from Nigeria. They referred to Article 9.1, this direct public finance, as speaking to the blood of the convention.
Wow. The blood of the convention?
Yeah. Just underscoring how utterly fundamental, how existential this issue of reliable finance is for developing nations. It touches the very spirit, the viability of the whole UNFCCC process for them.
So, stepping back, what does this all signal? For you, our listener, maybe grappling with this for UPSC mains or just trying to follow global affairs.
I think the core takeaway is undeniable. This Bonn meeting just threw into sharp relief the deep, persistent divide between developed and developing nations.
It's not getting better.
It doesn't seem to be on these core issues. We're talking fundamental disagreements about climate equity, about historical responsibility, and about the actual means of implementation, how we do climate action. So yeah, the agenda got adopted eventually. But the underlying tensions, the disagreements, they are incredibly palpable. And crucially, they're unresolved. This isn't just about rules of procedure. It's about trust. It's about fairness. And ultimately, it's about whether global climate action can actually work effectively for everyone.
It's clear those foundational cracks are still there, maybe even widening. But okay, despite the deadlock, the frustration, work did eventually get started once the agenda was sort of grudgingly adopted. What were some of the other important things that did get discussed from day 3 onwards?
Right. Once they cleared that initial huge hurdle, the machinery did start moving on other critical items. Discussions kicked off on the Just Transition Work Program that's all about ensuring the shift away from fossil fuels is fair, equitable, deals with the social and economic impacts.
Important stuff.
Very. Then there was the UAE dialogue on the global stocktake. That's the process for checking how the world is doing collectively on meeting the Paris Agreement goals.
Assessing progress.
Exactly. Also, consultations on the Baku to Belém roadmap for climate finance that's separate from the Article 9.1 fight, more focused on that new finance goal, the NCQG,
Okay.
and the Sharm el-Sheikh dialogue on Article 2.1c, which is about aligning all global finance flows, public and private, with climate goals. A huge, complex task.
So work continues.
Yes, what's really important to grasp here is that despite the initial gridlock, despite the very real frustrations, the urgent work of tackling climate change does go on. But, and it's a big problem, but these foundational disagreements on finance and trade aren't just going away.
They're casting a long shadow.
Absolutely. They represent deep fissures in the whole global climate architecture, and they're going to heavily influence the road to COP30 in Belém later this year and definitely beyond. These aren't just procedural squabbles. They hit right at the core principles. Justice, equity, shared but differentiated responsibilities. Understanding these nuances is absolutely key if you want to grasp where international environmental policy and global cooperation are heading.
What an incredibly insightful deep dive. It really brings it home, doesn't it? We've seen so clearly how these crucial issues, climate finance, especially that sharp distinction between direct public money under 9.1 versus mobilizing private funds under 9.3, and the incredibly tense issue of unilateral trade measures like CBAM, how these continue to be major fault lines in the negotiation.
They really are.
And these aren't abstract policy debates. They directly affect how real climate projects get funded, who pays, how it happens on the ground, especially in developing nations who are, let's face it, often bearing the brunt of the impacts already.
Which leads us to a really important question for you, our listener, to think about. Given these persistent, deep-seated disagreements, this clear lack of trust, how can the global community actually speed up climate action in a way that feels genuinely equitable, genuinely just, to all countries?
Especially those most vulnerable ones.
Exactly. What responsibility do all sides have to actively try and bridge these divides, not just kick the can down the road again and hope something magically changes?
That's a powerful question to leave people with, and we really want to hear what you think. What stands out to you from this deep dive into the Bonn talks? What other questions does this raise for you as we look towards COP30 in Belém?
Your perspectives matter.
They absolutely do. And for our UPSC aspirants listening, remember, this isn't just news. These are critical concepts for your current affairs, your IR papers, environmental studies, especially for that daily mains preparation.
Key linkages there.
For everyone, really, understanding these global climate discussions is just essential for being an informed citizen in our world today.
Couldn't agree more.
We genuinely love hearing from you, digging deeper into your questions. So if this analysis sparked something, if you have queries, please do hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive, and definitely leave your thoughts and questions in the comments below.
We'll be reading them.
Absolutely. Stay informed, everyone. Stay curious. And join us next time on The Deep Dive.